Where were the key players in the days leading up to and on the day of September 10th? Were they where they claim they were? Those things should be able to be proven. There's a media strategy. It's been used for decades to hide uncomfortable truths. It's a strategy known as flooding the zone. Flooding the zone is a deliberate tactic. It's not something that happens accidentally. It's designed for a particular purpose. It is to overwhelm the information environment with such high volume of misleading and contradictory content that it becomes nearly impossible for any kind of reporter or investigator to focus on any single issue long enough to uncover what they're trying to keep hidden. Bad faith actors use this. Bad faith actors flood the zone, and they flood it with bad information, and they do it again to hide the truth. It exploits fundamental limitations in human attention. We just are not made as, historically, humans are made to kind of sit around and do nothing. This thing we all carry around with us all day, every day, that is new to the human experiment. Your great-grandparents did not stay occupied all the time. They didn't follow the news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They didn't have social media to interact with. They spent a lot of time watching the sun. Sometimes they watched it come up. Sometimes they watched it go down. Sometimes they just sat outside in the midday and watched it overhead. And they just watched cows walk around and birds fly. And they just sort of observed. Well, we don't live in that world anymore. We live in the world of news cycles and social media, and those algorithms reward engagement much more than they reward accuracy. So flooding the zone creates this constant barrage of information, and it ultimately overloads and overwhelms people. No matter how motivated you are, you can only process so much information. So when the zone gets flooded, your scrutiny diffuses. The corrections that sometimes arrive, they arrive too late. They get lost in the noise. And people grow cynical. And the ultimate effect is often a hidden truth. The person with a good lead or who's over the target, they're now competing in a zone flooded with nonsense. And anyone who falls for this nonsensical zone flooding is then discredited by the very people who floated the false story in the first place. In other words, someone will float a false story, a knowingly false story. They'll wait for people to pick up on it. And then when they report it, they'll say, nope, that's wrong. You're an idiot. You don't listen to anything that guy says. He's an idiot. So this isn't exactly like traditional propaganda, because traditional propaganda pushes a single coherent story, even if it's false, and it just pushes it and rams it down your throat. Flooding the zone mixes truths, half-truths, exaggerations, falsehoods, and it just throws it all out there. And it overwhelms the investigators who are trying to figure out what's the true story here. Which part should we follow? In the mix itself, the mix of truths and half-truths and exaggerations and falsehoods, it's deliberate. It complicates the fact-checking process. It creates plausible deniability, and it generates endless content for discussion, much of it false. It operates through a volume, speed, and repetition cycle. The sheer quantity forces media outlets to allocate their very limited resources, and they do it across many, many stories. And what it results in is shallower overall coverage. You can't really go deep on any of it. Just this week, we've seen several examples of flooding the zone, and I'm convinced it's coming from the bad guys, or the guys on the other side. Let's not say bad. You remember Friday when the hearing was over? Social media influencers filed out of the preliminary hearing after what was a disastrous week for the prosecution. It was a disastrous week. We were promised the parents were going to testify against Tyler Robinson. They did not. We were promised definitive proof. It was Tyler Robinson, and he took the shot, and we have it on video. We were given muddier footage than most Bigfoot sightings. There was the woman who provided the doorbell camera footage of what, on its face, appeared to be a gray Dodge Challenger pulling up to her house shortly before 1 a.m. Well, turns out she gave a statement that a bald man was driving. Oh, and he had 3 passengers on board. We learned Tyler Robinson drove onto campus, allegedly, around 8:30. But then he sat in his car for almost an hour before getting out and walking around. Normally, that might not be very weird, except that when he got out of his car, finally, he walked to the venue and met with a representative from TPUSA, and that's weird. That's weird. It makes you wonder if he was waiting on the representative from TPUSA. That's why he sat in his car for an hour. He got there too early. If he's like me, he gets everywhere way too early. I'm one of those people that shows up at the airport like 3 hours early. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. That's my life philosophy. But it's weird. And then he leaves campus. Okay, well, he comes back to campus like 30 minutes later. Why? To eat at Chick-fil-A in the student center, allegedly. On camera, all over the place. Fingerprints, DNA, receipts. It's also weird. So rather than the open and shut case we were promised, we got confessions through an alleged transferee, and we got them by way of unauthenticated pictures on his broken phone. And he testified about it on video And his mouth wasn't moving at times, but his voice was still going. It was very strange. There were no GPS locations. There were no eyewitness sightings. There were no license plate locations. There wasn't even one single clear picture of his face on a massively surveilled campus over the course of an entire day. His alleged lover, even he said he couldn't definitively identify him when he was shown pictures. In other words, we got nothing. We got nothing. It was a complete and total disaster. I knew it, you knew it, and trust me, the people on the other side knew it too. But when those influencers filed out of the courtroom Friday, they all gave essentially the exact same statement. Oh, we saw video. It was in crystal clear 4K HD. It puts this case to bed. Open and shut. Conveniently, that video wasn't shown to the public. But they were super double pinky swearing that it was what they saw. And their reports went viral. Traditional news, cable news, high-profile influencers, even the president's own namesake's son, all repeated the lie that they had seen definitive 4K HD proof that it was Tyler Robinson and he was on the roof and they saw him pull the trigger. We only know it's a lie because the social media influencers weren't the only people in the courtroom. There were other smaller content creators there. There were media professionals in that courtroom. And they compared what they saw to a blob, a blurry blob at that. But it didn't matter. The zone was flooded. The community notes on social media came too late. Most news stations never corrected the record. They never gave air to the other side of the story. And so for many not following the case very closely, they walked away believing there was crystal clear video shown. They were wrong, but that's what they believed. Then came word this week that Tyler Robinson and Nick Shirley, of all people, are related. They're not related, for what it's worth. It's gone viral today for some reason. There's no word, of course, why it would matter anyway. Nick Shirley's not part of the story. He's not alleged to have done anything at all, really. He's just a independent journalist, a citizen journalist. But for some reason, all over the internet today, people started spreading this false relationship, and they did it at viral speed. And what makes it even weirder is that this exact story popped up for a few days back in the middle of May. It was 2 months ago. It spread for a few days, and then it died out. Why did it die out? It wasn't true. It wasn't true in May. It's not true today. But it's still actively spreading as we sit here today. And people are spending time on it when they should be investigating other things. They aren't the only viral stories that have been reported. If you go way back in time, you remember the guy in the white shirt who pumped his hands a couple times? People went crazy on that. They spent weeks talking about this guy. I still hear people bring up this guy as if you can accurately, fire a firearm while violently pumping your hands. That's not how guns work. There was the guy under the Hall of Flags who was adjusting his hat and squeezed his hand for some reason. There were weeks of investigation into that guy. And someone finally got clear footage and his hand was empty. There are a lot of stories like this have popped up in the last 10 months. Just in the last day or two, people are circulating pictures of Erika's stepbrother. And they're trying to say he could have been one of the guys on campus or maybe one of the guys on the roof. It's very obvious that he's not one of them. First, he's way too fit. The guy's jacked. But second, why on earth would anyone risk tasking someone that close to Erika to pull off an op like this? Guys, it's zone flooding. All of these things are zone flooding. The more time you spend investigating the trapdoor theory, random people in the audience moving around, that's more time you cannot spend on parts of the case that actually need to be investigated. Like, where were the key players in the days leading up to and on the day of September 10th? Were they where they claim they were? Those things should be able to be proven. Can a .30-06 rifle damage be limited, really, in the way we saw? A lot of people think the answer is no. Was that really Tyler Robinson on campus? And where did he go? After he left campus, where did he go? Could he have been where he was alleged to be? Why did Charlie's shirt move like it did? I mean, we have strong motive to look into these things. We need to ask who had strong motive to remove Charlie Kirk from Earth. And why can't anyone recreate anything remotely close to what happened with Charlie's shirt, his neck, his head, the fact that he absorbed 2,000 or 3,000 pounds of foot-pounds of force and just stayed seated upright? Can anyone remotely recreate any of that using the type of round that was allegedly used? These are the types of questions that'll solve the case. The zone flooding is not going to stop. If anything, it's going to get worse now that we've seen what a disaster the prosecution has for a case. So keep your eyes on the prize. Stay focused. The more they flood the zone, the closer we are to the truth. I can assure you that. The closer we are to the truth.